Hello, friends. Uh, I'm just actually recording this because I'm switching from a Windows-based video editing system to a Mac. I know what you're thinking. So overdue is this guy behind or what? It's not that. I mean, having to learn a lot of new things. And I'd like to learn things. This stuff, well, hell, really... the operating systems behind some imaging things are kind of interesting. And there's always some bit of science to learn. But I tell you what, I'm quite pleased that I've just about had enough of history. It is interesting. I found myself explaining away some nonsense to somebody. Well, it was actually true about how terrible the ancient historical sources are. Remember, it was written on poor material. Parchment doesn't last forever, and the few things that actually survived on that, well, mostly did in a dry but not too dry atmosphere in Egypt, in rubbish dumps mostly. To keep documents alive, they needed copyists. They needed quite a wealthy state or benefactor so that what scrolls from even 20, 30 years before would, if everybody thought they were worth reading, would be duplicated and then go into somebody's personal library. But society being what it is, those libraries got generally looted and burned. I believe an awful lot of the historical records that from everywhere in, what would it be, Anatolia, which is now modern Turkey, and before was kind of everywhere, Byzantium and part of the old Greek states. Anyway, where did those documents go? Mostly to feed goats. Yeah, because they kind of eat anything, and the state of society had fallen so much that that's really the only value they had. It would be fair to say that perhaps out of everything ever written from the ancient world, less than 0.1% survives in any way, and that's usually a copy of a copy or somebody's medieval duplication, sometimes translated into Arabic and then back to Latin and God knows what else before then. And because that's the path of the people who survived with any kind of civilization. During the 700s, even there were kings who couldn't read. It was a very specialised bit of business. Not quite the Dark Ages that is conveniently marked out. You know, I went to, where was it? Think of it. Anyway, it was, Winchester Cathedral. Yeah, I know, the old song sticks in your head if you're an ancient prick like me. But the good part of it is, it looks really shabby from outside, I've got to say, but inside it looks shabby and worn, and there are parts of it that go back to, I don't know, like 700 AD. Now, bear in mind, the Romans pulled their army out in, 410. So, why was it the UK, well, it wasn't the UK, why was it this land that later became England kind of collapsed? The villas weren't maintained, the structure wasn't. They were Romano-Britons who were, wealthy and would have had a good reason to. Was it kept up for 50 years or something? Somebody to repair the tiles on the roof, to keep the bath water warm, toilets flushed, the aqueduct running. I guess so. I mean, it wasn't only the Roman administration that were rich, was it? So, but really by 500 and 520, there's nothing surviving as a record, or what you sometimes get is a visitor from somewhere else writing a little travel book, and that'll get back. I think there might have been a couple that were done. I'm trying to think of the guy. Was it one of the Ambrose or some travelling priest? Half the time you can't trust them anyway. But there was some indication that at about the period of Arthurian night tales, that there was some kind of... But look, there weren't stone buildings anymore. They're mostly made out of wood, and that doesn't help for storing your little scrolls or library books. And when I keep going on about scrolls, they were supplanted by the Codex, a book with leaves. It started quite early, I suppose. Nothing to do with the availability of paper, which was, well, you could say if anybody wanted to make the effort to find out about it and get some, could have been done from 100 AD. The Chinese were wrapping fish in paper or gifts or something about then. But they weren't great exporters of their technology. Just think what they did to people caught with a couple of silkworms down their trousers. I would have liked to have been a smuggler back at that time. It would have been unfortunate. I don't think they would have kept me alive. No. I would have tried it on though, I bet. And I'm just saying I'm still recording. Oh, thank fuck for that. Or not. Unlucky for you. So, the historical sources are really quite untrustworthy. Look at the greatest obsession of antiquity. That is the Roman admiration for Alexander the Great. How he... what would we say these days? Died young, died pretty. Yeah. It was to be a world conqueror, that was your model. But what have we got? The only thing that is anything like a portrait of him is from a mosaic in, of course, Pompeii. Or is it the other, Herculaneum, the other town that was roasted, baked in. But if it wasn't for that, we wouldn't have any surviving paintings, and he was much painted. Apelles, a Greek painter, supposedly did some pretty good pictures of him. Well, they were much talked about by his followers. So there wouldn't have been, and he's on coins, of course. They're not as many as you'd think. Unless they were popular with somebody. Coin collecting does give you a little bit of a glimpse into the ancient world. I picked up on, what's his name? I hate that. Garrett Ryan, who does Told in Stone. This is is it all ancient Rome? No, it's mostly. But it does spread around a little bit to the edges of the Greek empires and so on. But one of his hobbies, he's got that channel, one of his hobbies is cleaning up old coins that have been covered in muck. And well, it's not really a rust, it's just on copper coins. It has a kind of green patina, and you don't want to scratch down below that. But he does quite a fine job, and it seems to take quite some time. He says it's very therapeutic. Yeah, I can imagine myself doing one side of one, but that would be about it. But anyway, you can get some things that are clearly quite good portraits. There's a gold stater, which is quite a heavy and valuable gold coin from one of the post-Alexandrian kings, Demetrius, who was in what you'd call part of the Greco-Indian territory, part of the empire. Didn't last long. Sure, Alexander, he conquered Persia and the territories that were notionally under the satraps, local governors of the Persians. Though I don't think that's why he went so far. He did a pretty decent job of going up to through where Syria is today, Jerusalem, Egypt, of course. And that didn't do the place any harm, did it? We had the Ptolemies, who ruled there for a few hundred years, and the famous library was funded by the Ptolemies. But Alexander went on to fight some interesting battles, particularly with the... was the island called Tyre? I think so. And they wouldn't surrender, so they were in for it. And they had to build little bridges across and siege engines and all sorts of stuff. And they were in trouble because they didn't surrender. No, you didn't get good treatment if you didn't surrender. Interesting that. I mean, did they really get good treatment? Well, of course, they'd have to pay tribute. But were they left alive after surrendering? Perhaps. But we think... I think of modern times when people have surrendered to Russians, people have surrendered to Germans, and it hasn't gone well for them. No. I kind of take the view that try not to surrender. In fact, unless you've got a post-surrender plan, which is pretty much massacre all the people to whom you surrendered, which is not always immediately clear how that would work. Mind you, if somebody's stuck a gun in the back of your head, surrendering is, I give up. I'd shoot myself if I heard that from me. Yeah, trust me to surrender? No. But anyway, yes, doesn't seem to be a good idea in the modern world. So... in an age of popular crucifixions and other grisly deaths. By the way, here's another thing. Most of the ancient documents were, as I say, copied by somebody. A lot of them had what you could call political intent. They were praising somebody up or supporting some cause or rewriting a bit of victory speeches after some event to favour the winner, the person paying the writer's bills. Nothing new in that. But so you couldn't really believe entirely what they were doing. What I'm getting at is I think a lot of the horrible things that are gleefully reported done to people, they usually ascribe to an enemy or a group of people that the writer hates because his boss hates them. So if something was Orthodox Church and they were talking about the Roman Church, they'd accuse them of all sorts of deviousness, bestiality and perversions. On the other hand, if somebody comes from the East or the ancient Greek world, they're set up to be accused of all sorts of horrible things. I'm pretty sure the Persians got accused of diabolical deaths and tortures by later writers who thought, well, this what's the worst thing we can say? I heard a story about how they were thrown down a pit and, yuck. Yeah, we've all heard stories. Usually fervent constructions of the imagination of somebody who, in fact, fantasizes about such things. So, another untrustworthy source. I was going to say that Alexander was more of an explorer, really. I don't think it was all vanity and battles. He was a very short guy. Seemed from, as best I understand it, like a little bit nervy and an irritating twat, actually. all the things ascribed to him as witty sayings, and no doubt absolute sham. What was that thing about one of his generals where his general says, "Oh, if I were you, Alexander, I'd go about it this way," and Alexander says, "Well, if I were you, Petronius, I would, but I'm not. I'm Alexander, so I'll do it that way." Yeah, I think you get a lot of this sort of add-on history about people and their virtues if you're on their side. I suppose you could say the entire Hadith after the Quran was an attempt to beef it up a bit, since there's some passages about people that the writer didn't like seem to have no proper context or reason for it, but the Hadith really fleshes it out with, what is it really, the sayings of the Prophet and so on. So there's always motive there. Anyway, Alexander was certainly vain, nearly killed himself. When the crew got to India and won a battle against King Porus, and one of the asides of the writers, contemporary writers at the time, and then translated by all sorts of people, or copied anyway, rewritten. There's probably like 7,000 books from the ancient world on Alexander. Says that after winning against King Porus in India, he made a deal with him and gave him some Arabian white horses and gave him back 2,000 villages. I mean, what? 2,000 villages? Okay. I want to keep number 1492. There's a good-looking girl in that one. I'll have to speak to her dad. Anyway, right, so where did the horses come from? Well, the baggage train led to the supply lines and all sorts of stuff going. I mean, this is thousands of miles in which money from, Baghdad, wasn't it? Which was his base at the time. While he was thousands of miles away across Afghanistan. Can we say that Alexander was the only person historically ever to conquer the terrible territory of Afghanistan? I don't think we can compare the tribal divisions of Afghanistan now with what it would have been like 2,500 years ago. The accounts talk of crooked governors and little mini kings. So the other point too is a great Indus civilization had somehow disappeared, the Harappan. Even in Alexander's time, there would have been, would have been half covered over. That's how ancient it was. I even had a bit of dentistry there back with the Harappans. No writing that we can figure out. Good sewage, though. So in his time, there was already a kind of ancient world, how much it was spoken of. But Alexander was, what I'm saying is he was, to me, an explorer and easily bored and just wanted to go on and on. I don't think he would have stopped. Though strategically speaking, historically speaking, if he had continued for just one more big battle, because he would have been hooked up with not Porus, but the other guy from what was in the east of India, Moraya, something like that. He could have ended up with a few more Alexandrian cities all the way to. What was his goal? Was it China? No, not really. Just to kind of keep it interesting. His horse had died by then, or been killed, Bucephalus, buried in a river, was it? Vespasian. And he didn't want to go back and return. Well, his men wanted to go home. They'd been 7-8 years. They hadn't seen their families. So he agreed with that. he might have had other motives, but rather pridefully, he didn't return the same way he came. That was the safe way. That was a place there were posts and little forts along the way and supply trains and so on. He didn't want to go over the same ground twice. I think I recall Patton saying something during the Second World War. He didn't like to pay for the same real estate twice, meaning conquer again something he'd already fought over. So Alexander went down the river through, I think what we'd call Multan today, and then where the Indus Valley spread out, and took the walk across the desert, which was not a good idea. He had his what would you call it, admiral had gone off in a fleet of rather hastily built ships to go ahead and dig into the sand and make wells for water, or some very risky proposition. Now, I kind of know that little stretch of land because it's out what we call today Baluchistan, and it is dry on the coast. It's dry on every coast, but you have to go quite a way searching for water and dig deep. I don't think... Could they have dug deep? There were no locals there? I don't know. I think he was being a bit of a Alexander about it, a bit impatient. Anyway, sadly lost a lot, about 2/3 at least, of the army that he'd brought with him to make that journey back to Persia. And I think too that what would you call it, the camp followers, the people that went with the army, took supplies. Generally, the supply train in ancient Greek army, well, for Alexander, was modelled on his dad Philip's martial ideas, and that was to travel light. So it was not like they generally had a lot of oxen carrying carts, but they must have had some wheeled vehicle, you would think, for a journey like that. Some pack animals. Wouldn't have done any good. They would have dehydrated and died a lot earlier. Sure, they stayed and look. You can't pull these things to bits. We don't really know, even though Alexander, of course, had scribes and things reporting on all of this. Though there's some stuff about some of the scribes' journals being burnt in a tent or some nonsense. Alexander died, of course, from swamp fever not long after he got back to Baghdad. I hope I'm getting this right. Yeah. And what was he supposed to have said as he dropped his ring on the ground for somebody to pick up? Who do I will everything to? To the strongest. Bit of a Darwinian at heart, was it? I guess so. Where did this come from? Okay, it was the unreliability of historical sources, and I led up to that because I've just about had enough of it for, 55, 60 years almost. Are you kidding? No, not really. I've been reading historical accounts, some fictional, which was my want as a teenager, taking fiction for reality. And I've read some pretty good stuff, by which I mean, was it accurate? Possibly so, but very creative in the sense of created images of what I imagined that world was like. But we can't really know. Even if there was some kind of simulated magical time travel, it would be a creation. Look, here's something about going back in the past. While I was at Winchester, amongst some very interesting dead bodies in tombs, they had a little golden lift elevator that took you to a kind of middle floor at the back. If you're ever down there, take a look at it. It's a few quid to get in, but the ticket's good for a year anyway. It's what would be 17th, 18th century private library. Now, the good thing is, and they won't let you take any pictures, but I'm sure they have them if you were busting your gut to get one, but it's being there that counts, because there is an odour coming from these leather-bound books, which is no doubt a combination of the paper, some animal glue, would I be right thinking that way? The leather, kind of everything. Were they valuable? No, yeah, I wouldn't have. I wasn't going to pocket anything. There was nothing that really struck me. And anyway, I wouldn't want to send it back in one of those little jiffy bags with the pouches, because you can't hang on to the thing like that. Good to give it a good old sniff at home. Anyway, it was very transporting. Not just the room, because it was always a book room of Winchester Cathedral and that church part of it. I'm pretty sure. Might have been an old storeroom, but anyway, it's very authentic looking library in there. Why am I going on about it? Because the moment you walk in, and there was three of my two Australian friends who were visiting, and a good excuse for me to go places on the list. And there was just the three of us and one kind of caretaker, volunteer, a rather snooty lady, but you'd expect that. But nonetheless, she didn't seem to know much about the books, even though I chucked a couple of questions in there. Point is, it was quite transporting, and not as I imagined going back to a library from a few hundred years ago would be. Yes, sadly, that is one of the things I thought about, what every room smells like from the past. Every place. Mostly not good. But this wasn't bad. So, I'm done reading about history, but I'll go to a few places so I can give it a good old noseful of history. It's the senses that count. I've just knocked off a thing about artificial intelligence. I wonder, in the world of simulations, they'll ever cater to the nose. Because if they don't, there'll be no simulation at all. I'll leave you alone now.